I'm delighted you're all with us this afternoon for what I'm sure will be an amazing and engaging conversation. We're really lucky to have as guest Scott Goodstein, who I'll introduce momentarily, moderating a conversation between Michelle Lewis and Reverend Moose. And I have to say, these two folks, if you think you're powerless and you can never get anything through Congress, and like what a flaky idea that is, the average American citizen could never accomplish that, well, you might be in for a surprise, because that's what these two are doing. And I have to say, it's phenomenal, and it makes me want to just get on the phone and call my Senate. Well, I may not want to call my senator because the wrong one got elected, but we won't go there. We aren't going to have me railing on politics today. We've all had enough of that for the last 2 weeks. But without further ado, I'd like to do two things. I'd like to thank Brittany Jones and Nick Martin of Tech Change, who have been just the most fabulous behind the scenes and not so behind the scenes hosts of all of our virtual events. So thank you, Brittany and Nick and the whole Tech Change posse for making this possible. And then I'd like to introduce Scott Goodstein, who is the founder of Catalyst Campaigns and founded Revolution Messaging. I first met Scott at a coffee shop in Washington, D.C., probably sometime in the latter part of 2009. And he was introduced to me by somebody who I think will be here today, Josh Nesbitt, who's a PopTech fellow. And the rest is kind of history. I have to say, Scott has helped us with a number of initiatives, including back in those days, helping us get Peace Text off the ground. He's a PopTech board member, he's spoken, and he's a wonderful member of our curatorial team, which is how we have Michelle and Reverend Moose with us today. So Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you, and thanks for moderating today.
Great. Thanks for pushing me to constantly find and evolve our community. As some of you may remember that are on this call, Michelle Lewis started Songwriters of North America. She is a critically acclaimed songwriter. Never thought that she was going to be passing legislation in Congress, and realized that her community was not at the table when decisions were being made. The same is true of Reverend Moose, who recently co-founded National Independent Venue Association, which many people on this call will know as the Save Our Stages movement. And so we're going to get into a conversation about sort of from Michelle's side. She gave a great PopTech speech that you can find online about, that old-fashioned how a bill becomes a law, but the real version of it. And it's a phenomenal story of passing the Music Modernization Act, where ASCAP and BMI and the record labels all had somebody, but there was no one there representing the actual songwriters. And so I'm going to turn this over to Michelle with the simple question of, okay, so you went from 0 to 60, you built an organization, you got the Music Modernization Act passed. So that was it. Everything's great. How's it going now? We haven't talked to you since last year's PopTech.
Hi. Yeah, thanks for having me. Thank you, Leetha. Thank you, Scott. Good to be here. Yeah, so what they don't tell you in the I'm Just a Bill song from Schoolhouse Rock is how inevitably unhappy everybody will be after legislation gets passed. So I think, and the ACA is a great example of, endless lawsuits and sort of like trying to form a law into submission, beat a law into submission. So we're in that place right now. Part 2 of the I'm Just a Bill song, which is, luckily there have been no lawsuits, but there's a lot of sort of knockdown dragouts over the implementation because, sides are still a little bitter about losing a little bit here, losing a little bit there. So we are working with the US Copyright Office to hammer out how the Mechanical Licensing Collective, which is the entity that the MMA created, will get built and how the law will ultimately be implemented. So it's been busy. It doesn't sound nearly as sexy, and sort of like the rallying cry is not nearly as fun as like, let's pass a law. Now it's like, let's make the law work. It's definitely weedsy, and I feel like I should have a law degree at this point.
Nice. And I know you're also working on trying to get healthcare for your members, building out your membership organization. And
yeah, so we went from, 5 years ago, a friend group of 10 of us songwriters in Los Angeles, to now I think we're well over 700 all across the country. We have thousands of followers on social media accounts, various social media accounts, and we are definitely in the room, which is sort of what we had elbowed our way into doing when these decisions are being made, which is great. And then what we also found out, I think I talked about this last year, is that songwriters are not legally allowed to unionize because of an NLRB, a National Labor Relations Board decision made in 1984 under Reagan that specifically bars us from being able to have a union. So we, in the time since, getting that law passed, have been trying to find workarounds. And one of those workarounds, as Scott mentioned, is trying to create healthcare options for our members and for songwriters in our community as well. And that's been tough going.
So, which brings me to Reverend Moose. So, similar to Michelle's story, there was no independent. These are the DIY folks that barely want to be involved in politics, let alone organize a national movement. Can you tell me, sir, what happened during the pandemic and why you decided to step up?
Yeah, I don't know how much of this you remember, Scott, but you were actually pretty integral in the very early conversations that essentially fueled the path to get to where we are. You and I had plans to meet up on a Saturday while you were in town. The Friday afternoon, my workday was ended with an email from South by saying it was canceled. So through my work, my company Marauder runs Independent Venue Week in the U.S., and we realized there would be a whole lot of canceled shows and dates that the venues themselves would need filled, much less, the artists would now be without places to play at Austin. So we spent that weekend trying to figure out how to create sort of an empty venue map, if we could, and within days redirected that to being a town hall style phone call, or I should say redirected that effort to want to try to help in some manner through a town hall style phone call that still continues to this day on a weekly basis. It was very clear from those very first phone calls that the congressional support that was expected to come, and then of course what did come, didn't include the specific needs for the business model that is independent venues and promoters. So payroll isn't the biggest expense, and having programs like PPP that are primarily payroll focused isn't going to help the most important and necessary needs for places where mortgage and insurance and debt and all the other things that are your ongoing costs are what's going to consume that that monthly carrying cost. And I think, to the credit of the people that had joined together to be able to identify not just the need, but be able to put their own time into this and their own resources, we had a significant amount of complementary features. This person over here is used to community organizing, and this person over here comes from a political-ish background, and this person here comes from a marketing background and fundraising and so on and so forth. So we were able to focus on the strengths within that core team and then the core board, and I make this seem like it was drawn out, but this happened over days. I mean, like within days, we had an exploratory committee, we had a board, we had announced it to the overall community on the next Independent Venue Week town hall, and by the end of that first week, we had membership in every single state and DC. In fact, I should clarify, we had 48 states and DC at the beginning of that call. And 10 minutes later, we had every single state and DC. Like, that's how fast we were moving. And now we have 3,000 members across the country. We have the Save Our Stages Act, which is getting bipartisan support. The beginning, the ongoing process from just the creation, the intent was always to have something that is there past the pandemic. But because there had been many discussions about something in a similar nature over the years through various different people and platforms, but it never came together. And I can just say through my own background of having brought Independent Venue Week here and seeing like the natural growth and the trajectory that we had aimed, had we started this under less crazy times, I think we'd be looking at a parallel to other trade organizations and figuring out membership dues and bylaws and all those things before we ever opened that up. We didn't have that luxury. And we're somewhat, holding on to our own pants as we're running forward.
Both you and Michelle describe very daunting tasks to be able to get a bill through one house, let alone, Senate approval, et cetera. So if you just sort of talk about that urgency for everyone.
I think the bill is obviously what we're working towards, right? That federal support, that financial relief, but I don't think that's necessarily the unifying factor in the same sense as what has held this international, movement together, which is essentially the first reaction that all of these individual businesses had. I shouldn't speak completely inclusively, but the majority of what we saw was they were doing fundraisers for their staff. They were trying to help the community. They were pushing out artist fundraisers. It was to help others. That was the impulse from the beginning, was to help others. And then it was very quickly realized that the help for the independent venues wasn't coming, right? So it was like, first was the gut reaction of, we exist as a service to the community. We are going to serve the community. And the second one was, oh crap, what are we going to do? This isn't going to end in May, right? Like, I don't know if how much people remember, but when Live Nation and AEG announced that they were canceling all their April and May shows, everyone was like, holy crap, I can't believe that. There's not going to be anything until June, right? And then, Broadway said that there was going to be nothing until October 1st, and the world kind of went hush again then. And, it's like, so you just see these goalposts continually push. But what we didn't necessarily realize then, and even all these numbers that we've talked about, and for us, it's the reality that 90% of independent venues and promoters don't have more than a few months to be able to go without support. And those numbers were from the beginning. That was kind of like that early first 2 or 3 weeks of NEVA. So the fact that NEVA exists has extended the lifeline of many of these businesses, but it hasn't extended their resources. So people have gone into debt. They have emptied their retirement plans. They have borrowed money where they probably wouldn't have otherwise, or leveraged assets they wouldn't have otherwise leveraged, in the hopes that this movement that we're all part of and celebrating, I'm incredibly proud of it, but ultimately it has to lead to this act being passed, and that's what everybody is holding out for.
Yeah, without a doubt. And speaking of sort of moving forward into the future, I'll flip it back over to Michelle for a moment. You've lobbied now successfully once and have a lot, as you said, going back to clean up the bill, and no one's completely happy. Can you give us what you're looking forward to in sort of this new administration and new Congress, as sort of what's next for hopefully songwriters, and hopefully Save Our Stages Act finally either passes in lame duck or moves forward. But unfortunately, Moose, you're not going to be done with the Capitol Hill, as Michelle's about to tell us.
No, it doesn't. They don't let you. They keep pulling you back in. Yeah. So right now, I think, as Moose is saying, as you're saying, Scott, it's all about the HEROES Act. It's all about some kind of major relief bill. When the pandemic hit and everything shut down, songwriting and music production and performing, it's on this. What needed to happen first was healthcare workers, frontline, people on the front lines of the actual crisis needed to be supported right away. Because our industry is considered non-essential, I think we sort of got like wait, oh, musicians exist? What are, it was like, no one considered the effect that, the complete cataclysmic effect that these shutdowns would have on our industry, all across the board, making movies, making television shows, live performance, Broadway. So that first round of, what we ended up doing is lobbying for independent contractors to get included in unemployment benefits. That was a big deal for us. And that's kind of what we're lobbying for now in this next round of relief, which we're also waiting for too, is something called the mixed earner PUA, which is so that, it's too easy to even tell you, just know that that's what we're focused on. We're trying to get independent music creators, which is all of us. Very few of us have jobs, right? Very few of us work for other people or have bosses. We're trying to we're trying to be able to participate in unemployment. So that's what we're focused on. It's all about the HEROES Act. And, like Moose could probably, he's more of the minute, he's literally in the room, like getting the updates on where we are with the Senate bill. You could probably add to that.
Yeah, I wish I could. I think without getting too in the weeds on this, there's obviously a disagreement between the Democrats and the Republicans, and it's going to depend upon the two sides finding an option that allows them to politically move forward. But I also feel that as much as Neva's conversation has been focused on Save Our Stages, we have been incredibly supportive of the artists and the part-time workers and the contractors, the 1099s, the ones that aren't on 1099s. Like, this is a bad situation for everybody. And I think that if the business model were able to be included in the original program, I would still think we'd be out there fighting on the streets, because everybody is in need right now. Our conversation is focused on one specific piece of legislation because we have not yet been incorporated in the programs that exist, but the need is there on a national level, and other countries have figured it out much better than what the U.S. has done. But I will say to what Scott's point was, I don't get any joy out of any of the political discussions. They're very frustrating to me because it all seems very obvious. Here's a problem. Here's a solution. Both sides agree on the solution. And, now we'll wait another month and another month and another month and another month. And so it's like, to me, I just don't understand all the other elements. Like they feel, they're frustrating. And I'm used to pushing things forward, right? That's my entire career has been built on building things, helping artists and helping, these organizations and companies develop and grow. And so this, to me, is new territory, and I don't understand how it could be deemed functional.
Well, I think this is the major point of this conversation, and hopefully something that inspires us all to get more involved, is that neither Moose or Michelle have years of Capitol Hill experience, maybe never even wanted to go to Capitol Hill. I'm going to open it up for questions because I think what Michelle and Moose realize is that a lot of them are just trying to get through the day and don't have all the answers. And so by now having more people in a pluralistic society showing up on Capitol Hill, many members of Congress would have no idea the ins and outs of the finances of the music industry, or how Michelle gets paid through 5 different ways of licensing and mechanical licensing and stuff that you can learn about on her PopTech talk. So real quick before we and Michelle, if they can give us one sort of insight into how this has been going and why other people need to step up. First, you, Moose, since you don't own a nightclub to my knowledge, and yet we're able to step up, would you do it again? And should others step up in a similar way?
Yeah, this, like two weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks before everything started shutting down, I was sitting in a diner in New York with some other folks that actually ended up being on the board of NEVA, and we were talking about their need or their interest in being able to launch an organization of this nature. And we had discussed of, hey, let's have this conversation at the end of the summer, because we were all a little bit too busy at that time, and it would be a great conversation to have. And of course, I would want to help as much as I possibly could. So yeah, I think in any regard, I would see myself doing this under a different situation. Of course, the question is, would you do it all over again? Well, there are things that I think the things that I would do differently are really about the learnings from the it's interesting. I keep getting told from people with political backgrounds to be, that what we have accomplished in a short period of time is exceptional, right? Having the organization and the bill and the support and all those things. And so I acknowledge that and I recognize it, but it's not fast enough. And it's not fast enough for the people that need it the most. And that's the part that is upsetting. So I don't know how to answer that question of would I do it again, because we don't yet have that resolution that allows us to truly celebrate. And it also sounds like what Michelle is saying is, even should we get that, it's going to come with a headache that comes with it. So now I'm scared. But we're going to fight, and we're going to keep pushing to be able to get that resolution.
Great. And Michelle, this is now from the newbie to the seasoned pro in less than a year. If you could give us a little insight to some of your lobbying on Capitol Hill and what shocked you the most.
I've said it before that we fell ass backwards into a vacuum. The need, we identified, started personally with the need that we all as a songwriter needed to fix, which is that we weren't getting paid fairly from streaming, to find that we weren't alone in this. There were a lot of people who were feeling the same, struggle, and we collectivized. We found that we're more powerful together than apart. And so I think would I do this again? I think what we added to the conversation was sort of like an empathetic center of songwriters. Who doesn't love a songwriter? We're not out in front sort of dangling all of our stuff in front of people. Like, we're sort of worker bees behind the scenes. So, and we also added a bit of a diversity to the map of who had been out there lobbying on behalf of songwriters before that. I think Nashville was a real center, and adding LA, and now we're building into New York and Atlanta and Miami, because of COVID, because of the pandemic, that we don't actually have to be in those places to organize them. And we don't actually have to be in DC to have conversations with legislators. The 3,000 mile difference is not a thing anymore. So we've been actually able to effectively organize nationally in this, new normal, in this weird time we're in, more effectively than we were beforehand, because it's what everybody's doing. And we are still filling a need. Like, we're still finding the vacuum of need is still sucking us in. So as long as we're still filling a need, we're going to keep growing, and there'll still be a reason for us to exist.
And Congress is going to keep you busy for a very long period of time, knowing that the DSPs, the internet deals with music and songwriting.
Well, that's a really interesting. That's a really interesting piece that's evolved from 5 years ago, when the internet was going to save the world, and and tech industries were so lionized. Look at what Elizabeth Warren is saying about monopolies, and look at the sort of the hate against Facebook, and I think Congress is going to take that on. I think Congress is really looking at how these tech companies have affected democracy. So we were, as songwriters, in the micro, and then the music industry and the entertainment industry and macro, we were sort of the canary in the coal mine of how the tech industry could sort of ride in on the back of creators and sort of take everything. So I think that's change. I think that's a real change 5 years later in attitudes, and I'm looking forward to um, a sort of rear view mirror view of zero sum game governance, and sort of winner take all. I think getting back to a real sort of hashing it out in Congress. What I'm hoping for in this next administration is the work of governing, and being able to come to some kind of place with these big issues that we have coming in front of us.
Without a doubt. And Moose, unfortunately, I even if you get the $10 billion of the Save Our Stages Act, I believe that you're going to be dealing with issues for the very near and long-term future. Plus, as NEVA has already done, has been working to help a lot of those struggling employees that need healthcare, food assistance, et cetera. With that, let me open it up to the community for questions. You've got these two miraculous organizers. They would never have considered themselves organizers, but I can personally say that very few people have gotten a bill through one house, let alone both houses, and signed into law in one Congress. Most people hire lobbyists and spend 20, 30 years. And both Moose and Michelle have been able to put together scrappy organizations that move faster, use all of their assets, use their venue owners, songwriters, personal connections to members of Congress, all in unique ways. So with that, I see there's, if anybody wants to post a question in the chat or raise your hand I guess Brittany will help out with calling on some folks.
I mean, it looks like we have one question in the chat. If we want to just give Josh, I don't know if you want to expand and come on camera. Josh wrote in the chat, I'm wondering how and when you and your community decide that new actions are needed.
I could probably start that from the introductory level, because for us, the pandemic necessitated the organization of this one specific business sector. And because the groundwork had already been done by bringing Independent Venue Week to the US, and Independent Venue Week was in itself, I guess, kind of a precursor to this same type of grassroots movement. The idea is shine a light on the venues that are independent, show that they're different, why they're different, what makes them special. And it's essentially a marketing blitz that is focused on this specific business model is different than the one down the street that would appear to be the same to most consumers. So with NEVA, the catalyst here was that we were screwed. That the venues were just really, really screwed. Everybody was in the same sense. It was essentially a natural disaster that affected the entire sector instantaneously. And if this were a hurricane or a flood, it would have been more obvious. Everybody would have said, we're going to put the funds into this downtown area or into this state or this coastal community or whatever the case might be. In this case, those funds, at least at the time, felt like they did exist, just not for this business sector. So it was forced upon the community to at least mobilize. And as far as future touch points go, now that we are organized and we have both a 501c6 and a 501c3, it gives us the ability to be able to plan for the future in a post-pandemic world. Our focus right now is specifically on the Save Our Stages Act, but there will be a 2021, a 2022. There will be a rebirth of live events and people congregating in places and comedy clubs and nightclubs and music clubs or festivals and amphitheaters and all of these things. And when that happens, the conversation and the needs are going to evolve. And I'm sure Michelle is seeing the same thing, several years after the launch. the catalyst to begin is just the starting point. And I will publicly begrudgingly talk about how I have no interest in politics, but the truth of the matter is I do have interest in being able to help create change. And if politics are needed to be able to create that change, then that's what we'll do. But there's so many different places that we could, as a community, learn from each other and help each other and build a better future, both for the business owners and the communities that are involved with them.
And I can just add, just in case you don't, you said 501c3 and 501c6. Those are numbers and letter combinations that I had no idea what they were as a songwriter. We don't deal in, charities or nonprofits. It's just not my background at all. But that is something I forgot to mention, is at the top of COVID, we found as a 501c6 is a trade organization. It's not a charity. It's not a charitable organization. So donations to your trade organization they're not like a tax write-off. And they can't be used for lobbying. So, so donations can't be used for lobbying. So you have to, the way you fundraise is different. And the kinds of money, the way you market it is different. We couldn't give aid. We couldn't give relief to, sorry, my headphone just fell out because I got so excited talking about this.
We couldn't give relief to fellow songwriters because that's just not
can do. So we formed a C3, which is a charitable organization. We're able to fundraise for that, and we've been able to give grants. So they're two sort of sides of the same nonprofit coin. That moving forward, if you do want to form like a nonprofit entity, Moose was really smart to sort of do the same at the same time, to do both at the same time, because you could do sort of the lobbying efforts on the C6 side and the aid efforts on the C3 side. That's very kind of like pragmatic information to have.
And as these organizations evolve, both Michelle and Moose are going to realize that they also are going to need to have political action organizations and other pieces of the legal alphabet soup of C4, C6, C3, possibly a PAC, etc. And it just keeps evolving. I don't want Moose's head to explode while we're on this call, so we will keep pushing forward. There's a question from Margaret Kramer, and then there's also I'll get to Tom and Sean's questions in the chat. Margaret.
So probably like everyone on the panel, I was intrigued by Mark Geiger's announcement of the founding of Save Live and those what appears to be a collective pursuit that seemed to be aligned with what Moose is doing. But as I dug deeper into it, I realized that there might be a predatory aspect to this. How does owning a controlling interest in what is essentially a distressed asset at this point become beneficial to the club owners, and then of course the bands who pass through it, who are booked, the promoters as an extension, and then of course the songwriters who are writing and publishing the songs that are being performed. So what I wanted to ask the panelists is what is your interpretation of it? I mean, is it something that is cloaked in goodwill? And what makes me ask that question specifically is the 1 extra percent that allows him the controlling interest. It really triggered something in me as a small business owner. So I just thought we could talk for a second about the future of that.
I'll turn it over to Moose and Michelle. My own personal take is that if you're trying to be helping of an organization, you don't need to be predatory in asking for 51% ownership of these organizations that are distressed. Everybody knows that nightclubs right now are distressed. I think it would be altruistic for him to come to the table with 20% stake, and I want to sit on your board and give you some advice and make sure you're making smart decisions. So I need to be on your board to have insight into your books. But 51% to me seems very cannibalistic in nature. I'm saying that as my own personal Scott Goodstein opinion, not representing any organization. Moose or Michelle?
I think that, NEVA, the existence of NEVA is to be able to help support and preserve the independent businesses, the independent promoters and the venues, and to give them the resources and the tools to be able to do what they want to do with their businesses. And there is, should somebody choose to sell off a controlling share or just select investors, that's their decision. And they should be free to make whatever decision they feel is best for their own businesses. And I think that we want to be able to give people the environment where they can make options that are in their own best interest. And our ability to fight for federal funding is what we're doing to be able to make sure that those decisions are made from a place of willingness as opposed to desperation. And we're going to continue to fight on the federal level to make sure that any decisions that are made in regards to selling or investments are made because they have the desire to do it and not because they're backed in a corner. So I don't think that necessarily specifically answers your question, Margaret, but I can tell you from NEVA's perspective, we want people to make decisions that they feel are best for their businesses, and to do so in a position of strength and pride.
Great. Because we're on a short time, I think that pretty much answered it. I do want to, we've got about 5 minutes left. So Tom LeBeau, if you want to ask your question directly.
Sure, thanks. My question was just simply, you guys have done this work, and I imagine that you've run into all sorts of people in all sorts of organizations while you've done it. And I just wonder, what are the other organizations, both arts and otherwise, that you think it makes sense for us to form coalition with?
A big part of our success was coalition building, was being a part of the greater entertainment industry, and the music industry, and then the entertainment industry. So, we started with aligning with the publishers, the performance rights organizations, and then the record labels. Things like, we grew very naturally as a coalition with the other aspects of our industry, and we were able to, again, by sort of like giving a little bit to get a little bit. The negotiating was on our side of the table, and then with that's where it sort of started, and there was a lot of friendly fire with our side of the table, and then sort of again on the other side of the table, the tech side. And ironically, or not ironically, but I guess where you hope to get is to partner ultimately with your enemies, right? You hope to partner with the coalition. Like right now, as we're implementing the law, I've become friends with the president of the Digital Services Coalition. Like, Garrett's one of my buds. He's a good guy, and we disagree a lot, but partnering with the other side is part of that diplomacy and that sort of moving the needle in some kind of way that turns out I'm well suited towards. Like I think is very important, and so I've identified that the next frontier for us is to partner with the other side, is to work with tech as opposed to against tech. I think we're there.
And with that, we've got about 5 minutes left. If there's anyone else that has a question, I saw Sean Watterson did put a comment in there about making sure that it was actually active, nightclub owners or active singer-songwriters showing up and having real conversations on the Hill. I do think that there's a genuine and authenticity of seeing Michelle Lewis showing up on Capitol Hill, who can talk about, she doesn't make her money from writing songs for, some evil corporation through juke joints and some type of, 1900s mafioso. I think people see that Michelle is real and authentic. Moose has been representing nightclubs that are real and authentic, and haven't been showing up, but have known people in their community, have been standing up for their community. I'd love to see if there's any other questions, or turn it over to Michelle and Moose for some final words. Leetha? No.
Well, first of all, thank you guys. This was an amazing conversation, and it's always lovely to see a number of the PopTech community here on screen who I've been missing a lot. So thanks for all of you who joined us to sit in on this. And we had Maurice Mitchell with us a couple weeks ago, who spoke at PopTech a couple of years ago. And Maurice said, this pandemic has made the invisible visible. So the vulnerabilities of the world are like right out in front of us now, the things we could scoff at. And, I think when I think about the, independent venue world, which one of my sons works in, it's an extremely vulnerable place. Songwriters who aren't, of huge fame and renown, who work every day just as hard as everybody else. So maybe if you guys could just say, is there anything any of us can do to help support what you're doing, or, to just be more cognizant of what's going on here?
Thank you, Leetha. Yeah, I mean, I think what we've all turned to in creating these movements is social media, the good, the bad, the ugly. And so I will just heap tons of praise on Moose for the Save Our Stages name, hashtag. I think the effectiveness of that simple messaging, it is exactly what it is. And so when you see that hashtag, when you see that, pop up on your, in your Instagram feed, follow it, support it, amplify it. You become part of this virtual army that, we were able to mobilize the SONA to get a bill passed, and we need to now mobilize once again en masse to get Save Our Stages passed. There's no downside. It's obvious, it's clear, has momentum. When we get close to a HEROES Act and there's an activation to call your senators, please bring up Save Our Stages and Mick Sterner, I will say, or that would be our thing too.
Moose, any parting words?
Yeah, I can't take credit for coming up with the Save Our Stages hashtag, though I do think I might be able to take credit for Neva, the name Neva. But even that, I would probably debate and say that that's a shared credit, because the like Sean had said in the chat, this has been a shared effort from the very beginning. And the people that came together to be able to have those first conversations, there was no roadmap. We had to create the roadmap. And in this respect, we had the good fortune of having thousands of people that were out of work, and their teams that were out of work, and the people that played them and that appreciate them also being out of work, because it's such a miserable thing to be in. You feel so helpless and you just want to help. And this is everyone trying to come together and help, and unfortunately just having too much free time on their hands. But that has helped us mobilize. And Michelle is exactly who you would want to come and sit down with a congressperson and tell their story. And the truth of the matter is I'm not. The venue owners are, and they're the ones that are calling their representatives and their senators. They're the ones that have hosted fundraisers for them in the past. They're the ones whose businesses they need to sustain in their own districts, or they're not going to be able to get reelected because of the economic impact the loss is going to have in the communities, and it's going to be felt. We launched SaveOurStages.com as an external portal because we knew that the Neva name was not sexy enough in itself. I can't take credit for the Save Our Stages one, but I'm going to die on the other sword. Save Our Stages, it's all encompassing. And if you were to go to the website, SaveOurStages.com, it's both an opportunity to reach out to your congressperson, It's also an opportunity to donate, should you so be inclined, to the NEVA Emergency Relief Fund, which is intended as a grant program for the independent venues and promoters where the funding that is accessible to them is just not enough right now.
With that, I just want to say thanks, Moose and Michelle. I know that you guys are doing calls literally every day, hearing different stories from your lobbyists and different stories from members of Congress, and who knows if there will actually be something done or not done. And I do encourage everyone to check out SONA and Save Our Stages to follow up with these legislation. And as Michelle said, any amplification that you can do. If you see us Save Our Stages, feel free to post it. It really does matter. Moose and team have built a giant movement and would not have a stand-up piece of legislation had it not been for the entire world, or at least the majority of Americans who care about arts and culture standing up in such a way. Leetha, thanks for having this conversation with us.
Thank you, guys, and I think we're all inspired to do whatever we can to. I think, as you point out, sustain. Culture is an important part of the human existence, and the more we can do to keep organizations and institutions afloat right now is, the least of what we can do in many ways. So thank you all, and thanks everybody for joining us, and we hope to see you soon again. Take care. Bye now.